DNA is the genetic material found inside the nucleus of the cell, just here. The DNA is packaged into chromosomes. In each cell, you have 23 pairs of chromosomes, and in each pair, one comes from your mother and one comes from your father. Why is this? This is because you are made up from a sperm and an egg. When they join together, we have half of your DNA comes from your sperm cell, from your father's DNA, and half of your DNA comes from the egg cell, your mother's DNA. So, in the baby, there is half of the chromosomes from mum and half of the chromosomes from dad. So, in each pair, you have a paternal chromosome and a maternal chromosome. Okay. So, looking at chromosome structure in a bit more detail. Here is my chromosome. Okay. So it is 2 lengths of DNA, 2 arms joined in the middle like this. Okay. In my pair of chromosomes, I have then another chromosome. All right. Now, what you can see here is that the chromosomes are similar in that they're both red, but this one is just red, whereas this one is sparkly red. Okay. And within a chromosome pair, that's exactly what you have. They are similar, but not identical. So, in a chromosome pair, you have the same genes, but different alleles. Now, what that means is that you could have the gene for hair colour, but the allele blonde from one parent and brown from another parent. And that's how inheritance works, and we'll look at that in more detail later. Going back to chromosome structure. So here is our chromosome, and it is made up from 2 chromatids, 2 arms. The arms are entirely identical. Okay? So within a chromosome, the 2 arms that make it up are totally the same, and they can act as templates for each other. So if we just have one chromosome arm, then it can copy itself to complete the chromosome. Likewise, if we just had one chromosome arm here, it could copy itself to make a complete chromosome. Okay? So, what we can say is that a chromosome is made from 2 identical chromatids, and that is what the arms are called. So the chromatids are the identical arms. This is important when it comes to looking at cell division. Okay, we have 2 types of cell division that we need to know about. Okay, the first is basically to make identical copies. The second is to make sex cells. Okay? Now, some important words here. If we're making identical copies, we are doing mitosis. If we are making sex cells, we are doing meiosis. They're similar but quite different. So asexual reproduction done by mitosis, making identical copies, and in this case we will almost always end up with pairs of chromosomes, so it will be a diploid cell. Okay, whereas when we're making sex cells, because we're looking at half the chromosome number, we will be looking at single chromosomes, and so we'll be making haploid cells. Okay, so let's look at how this works. If we start off with our chromosomes, here we have our chromosome pair, okay, and they're quite happy. What we have to remember is that this one and this one are identical, and this one and this one are identical. So what happens is that the chromosomes line up in the middle of the cell, and they separate by their chromosome arms, like this. Okay, so we then end up with two sort of half cells. When these then replicate, this then makes a complete cell, a complete chromosome. That makes a complete chromosome. Then that makes a complete chromosome, and that makes a complete chromosome. Oopsie. So you end up with two copies that are exactly the same. To draw it, just make it a little bit clearer. Here's our nucleus. Okay, and in our nucleus we have a pair like that, and maybe another pair like that. Okay, what will happen is that in this nucleus the chromosomes line up in the middle. Okay, now they don't just line up in space, they line up on protein fibers. Okay, and those protein fibers are called spindle fibers. Then the chromosomes will split, and you will get the single chromatids moving down the spindle fibers towards the ends of the cell. Okay, and then to complete the full cycle, you will then have two cells, okay, with half chromosomes in, okay, like this. But then when they replicate, you end up with two cells with full chromosomes in, which are exactly the same as this original cell. And that process is called mitosis. And in mitosis, you have genetically identical cells being produced. So you start with one, and you end up with two genetically identical cells. Meiosis is a little bit more complicated because we aren't trying to end up with genetically identical cells, we're trying to end up with sex cells. Okay? So in meiosis, if we start off with our pairs of chromosomes, so here's one pair, and here's another pair. Okay? In meiosis, we undergo two divisions. So in the first division, the pairs of chromosomes line up on the spindle. So we have a pair here and a pair here. Okay? And they then divide. So one pair goes off this way, one goes off this way, one goes off this way, one goes off this way. So you end up then with a cell, okay, and you've got the chromosomes at each end. Okay? That cell will then divide like this. Okay? And then what will happen is you'll have the next split. And in this split, you're going to split the individual chromosomes. So in the first split, so division 1, we split the pairs. Okay? And then in division 2, we're going to split the chromosome. So what will happen here is that what's interesting is they divide at 90 degrees now. So we'll have the chromosomes lining up, I'm doing this way too big, like this. Okay, and sorry, this should really be 2 cells. My bad. Okay, and then chromosomes lining up like this. Okay, so then the chromosome splits, so a chromatid goes in each direction along the spindle fibers. Okay, and you end up then with 4 cells. 1, 2, 3, 4, with a chromatid from each chromosome in that cell. Okay, now when that replicates, you will have a full chromosome from in each cell. Okay, and if we now look back at the original cell here, we can see that these 4 cells have half the chromosome number, and so that makes them sex cells because they have half the chromosome number, so they are haploid, whereas this one is diploid. Okay, if 2 of these fused, if that and that added together, then obviously they would make that, and this process is called meiosis. And that is how we make our sex cells, our sperm cells, and our egg cells. What you should do now is go back through this video, maybe have another look at it, make sure that you're happy with the definitions. Check through the pages in your textbook that will go through this again, and then make a summary in your booklets. And we'll talk through this properly on Friday.